Hi students, welcome to the fourth and last part of this four-part series of biological oxidation electron transport where we are covering competency number 6.6. Alright, the competency says describe the processes, biochemical processes involved in generation of energy in the cells. We have specific learning objectives where we cover all the electron transport chain, biological oxidation, and the ATP synthesis, all right, and their applied and clinical importances. So, right away, it's invariably, I should tell you right now that if you haven't watched the previous three parts, please go pause this video, go and watch those three parts. They are linked in the video description, and then please come back. So, in this video, right away, we will start with the inhibitors of electron transport chain. This can come as a long question in which you need to give this entire diagram and you need to give all these names. All right, or it may come as a short note in suppose complex 1 comes as a short note, then you need to write the complex 1, what are the parts of that complex, what are the reactions, as well as you need to mention the inhibitors. All right, and apart from that, they are one of the favorite questions of examiner in Viva when you can't answer anything, okay, because this is easy and most students can answer this one. So what's the inhibitor of complex 1? So amobarbital, rotenone, pyridine A, and guanethine. Remember, this is rotenone, not retinone. Okay, rotenone, right? And amobarbital is often written as barbiturates. Barbiturates. So barbiturates. Okay, barbiturate, barbituric acid. These are a group of drugs you will be studying when they are used in next year pharmacology. Anyway, so these are the inhibitors of complex 1. When it comes to complex 2, there are many textbooks in which often they omit the inhibitors of complex 2. I don't know why. So there are, as of now, for you guys, you need to know 3 inhibitors of complex 2. Those are malonate is the competitive inhibitor of complex 2, and along with that carboxyne and TTFA. Right? What is TTFA? It is thenoyl trifluoroacetone. Okay, thenoyl trifluoroacetone. Anyway, coming to complex 3, are antimycin A, British anti-leucite, hypoglycemic agents. Okay, any compound or medicine that lowers blood glucose has got a potential to inhibit complex 3. And last but not the least, complex 4 of ATP synthase, that is classic poisons, inhibit them. Those are cyanide, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and sodium azide. Now, if you are asked which is the most poisonous compound on earth, okay, most poisonous compound for human beings, for living organism, the answer lies over here in complex 4. Okay, no, it is not cyanide. You have heard that potassium cyanide because the name comes up in every folklore. Okay, because you chew potassium cyanide tablet or you take in this much and you die. Of course, it's possible, but you will read in forensic medicine that cyanide in form of sodium NaCN or KCN goes into the stomach and then reacts with HCl to forms hydrocyanic acid, HCN. So this is the active poison. Okay, so if a person has got a syndrome known as achlorhydria, you must have read in physiology by now, where gastric secretion is totally hampered, or if the person is under severe and not antacid, proton pump inhibitor, those which suppresses acid secretion, then they will have a very reduced action of potassium cyanide, and a person can actually survive even on ingestion of potassium cyanide. But the most poisonous compound will not spare you just like that. It is sodium azide. Highly toxic. It is totally banned. You cannot travel with sodium azide. Okay, you need a special permission from government. It is so much dangerous compound. Okay, anyway, I'm not giving you any sinister ideas. Just know this: sodium azide is one of the most, if not the most, poisonous compound, and they act by inhibiting the respiratory chain. So let us look again. Apart from this, So what's extra? So let us recap in this slide. Barbiturates such as amobarbital inhibit electron transport chain by blocking transfer from, now this is an MCQ question, from iron sulfur center to coenzyme Q. Okay, if you can't remember anything, just remember the names, it's fine. Okay, at sufficient doses they are fatal in vivo, so you need a lot of barbiturate to act as a poison. Okay, otherwise they will not act as a poison. They are anti-epileptic drugs, but they are not poisonous unless given in a very high dose. Dimercaprol, antimycin A inhibit complex 3. Okay, fine, no problem in that. Classic poisons H2S, carbon monoxide, cyanide, and azide, of course, inhibit complex 4, and they can totally arrest respiration. So that is the final common pathway. Okay, if you block there will be total block in respiration, and as usual malonate is the competitive inhibitor of complex 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is done. What's left? That is complex 5 or the ATP synthase. In many textbooks it is known as complex 5. So atractyloside. There's another inhibitor, Bongregate. Okay, atractylosides inhibits oxidative phosphorylation by inhibiting the transporter of ADP into ATP out of the mitochondria. There is a transporter, ATP transporter. Atractyloside actually inhibits that. There is an exchanger, okay, ATP ADP exchanger that performs in a flip-flop mechanism, just like this one. So ATP binds to one side, it flops, it everts, and then the ATP is delivered to the inner side. And similarly, ATP binds to other side and then it again flops. So it's a flip-flop mechanism. This is inhibited by atractyloside and Bongregate. Okay, ATP ADP exchange transporters they are inhibited by Bongregate. So ATP synthase is actually inhibited by these ones, right? Remember the names, very important. Make a chart, write these names because these are new names, right? Next, we come to the uncouplers of oxidative phosphorylation. Remember, in our last class, I told you how oxidative phosphorylation is regulated. It is regulated because ADP, the level of ADP, supply of ADP regulates the rate of respiration, right? Because respiration and phosphorylation are coupled. One cannot happen without the other. But these compounds, these uncouplers, they uncouple. So what do they uncouple? They are toxic in vivo, causing respiration to become uncontrolled. Hence, the rate is no longer limited by the concentration of ADP or inorganic phosphate. So complete disruption of respiration and phosphorylation chain coupling. Okay. So what's the use? Okay, I'll tell you the use later, but you should know the names of the uncouplers. Each and every name is important. Just by knowing 2,4-DNP is not enough, because now is the age of MCQs and you never know what question you will have. So it's important. So 2,4-DNP, 2,4-dinitrophenol, 2,4-DNC, 2,4-dinitrocresol, CCCP. These are carbonyl cyanide, meta carboxyphenyl hydrazone, okay, and FCCP. These are also carbonyl cyanide. This is trifluoro, okay, trifluorocarbonyl methoxyphenyl hydrazone. If the names are difficult and if I spell it wrongly, I'll be showing you the names, and because often I also get confused. Anyways, so valinomycin, high dose of aspirin, and oligomycin, these are all important antibiotics. Okay, these completely blocks oxidation and phosphorylation by blocking the flow of ATP, by blocking the flow of protons through ATP synthase. All of them has got a same mechanism. Okay, now okay, let me quickly show you the names. The first one was TTFA, thenoyl trifluoroacetone. What is TTFA? This is an inhibitor of complex 2. Next is CCCP, carbonyl cyanide, meta chlorophenyl hydrazone, and you can pause this video and write them down. And next one is FCCP, carbonyl cyanide, para trifluoromethoxyphenyl hydrazone. Okay. So I think I added a carbonyl extra, right? I'm sorry, I was mistaken. These names are actually difficult for you to remember, and you can see how it's difficult for me to remember. Honestly, the full forms of these will not be asked. Okay, full forms of these will not be asked, structure will not be asked, but these will be given as abbreviation only. So if you know FCCP and CCCP, that's enough for you. Okay. Next, we go to uncouplers of oxidative phosphorylation. We continue with the uncouplers, but now we look at the physiological uncouplers. So, what are physiological uncouplers? Long chain fatty acid, hormones like thyroxine, and a special uncoupling protein known as thermogenin that is present in brown adipose tissue. So what's the use of these uncouplers? You know what uncouplers does? The energy from respiration is not used in phosphorylation. So what are they used now? Now they are totally used in production of heat. Phosphorylation is no longer needed or not happening. So entire energy is used in production of heat. This is specially utilized in newborns, okay, who don't have the shivering mechanism. You know, shivering is a protective mechanism by which adults can generate heat in presence of cold. This is a reflex. Also in hibernating animals, because they cannot generate their body heat during hibernation. So these physiological uncouplers deliberately uncouples the oxidation and phosphorylation, and the entire energy is used in production of heat and keeping the body warm. Along with that, calcium ions, they can produce these uncouplers, uncoupling effects. Now, this thermogenin is also known as uncoupler protein 1, UCP1, okay, uncoupler protein, thermogenin. So, all of these factors, long chain fatty acid, thyroxine, calcium ions, these actually will enable or will activate UCP1. And what does UCP1 do? You see, UCYOUSW. Okay, not UC. You see that UCP1, what it does, it disrupts the proton gradient. Now, you know, during the each and every electron transport, there was a proton gradient there that was being formed, which is nothing but excess H plus on the intermembrane space and less H plus in the mitochondria. So this proton gradient is utilized, and this proton gradient, actually this proton originally passes through the ATP synthase, and that energy is utilized in production of ATP. But these uncouplers actually are ionophores. Okay, ionophores means these are specific, these act as specific ion channel, and in this case they simply allow H plus to travel through them instead of these ATP synthase. So there is lack of any proton motive force, PMF, and the chemi-osmotic hypothesis totally fails, and so there is no production of ATP. Minded, the electron transport continues. Electron transport continues, and ultimately oxygen forms water. ETC is not hampered at all. But the energy of ETC in the form of proton motive force and H plus was used to transfer protons through this and resulting in production of ATP. That thing does not happen. Next, okay, so we are done with inhibitors and uncouplers. Now we are next part of the discussion is shuttles. So what are shuttles? So, you know, oxidation of extra mitochondrial NADH, okay, the NADH that is produced outside mitochondria, for example in glycolysis, right? You know, TCA cycle happens inside mitochondria, so no problem in that. But there are many pathways that produces NADH outside the mitochondria that occurs in cytosol. So these NADH needs to travel inside the mitochondria in order to be oxidized by the electron transport chain. But these NADH cannot just go through the membrane into the mitochondria. So what happens? There are carriers which indirectly transfers or shuttles, okay, these NADH from the matrix towards the intermembrane space, from the intermembrane space towards the matrix, okay, from outside to inside. And now we will look at these, okay. So for example, see, it is produced continuously by this enzyme 3-phosphoglyceride dehydrogenase in glycolysis. So under aerobic condition, as I told you, these mitochondrial NADH, these extra mitochondrial NADH does not accumulate, and somehow they are presumed to be oxidized by respiratory in mitochondria. This is what happens, okay, when oxygen is in plenty, every bit of reducing equivalent is oxidized and ATP is produced. So how do they get in? So these get in via paired shuttles that I will be telling you right now. These reducing equivalents passes through the mitochondria under the influence of indirect shuttles. There are two mechanisms to be precise. Number one is glycerophosphate shuttle or glycerol phosphate shuttle. These are predominant in skeletal muscle and brain. These are the preferred method of shuttling these NADH into the mitochondria in skeletal muscle and brain. Whereas in all other cells, universally preferred, that is in liver, kidney and almost everywhere else, mallet shuttle is used. So let us look at these two shuttles. Remember, these will come as short notes. You need to know only the diagram. If you know the diagram, you can explain it very well and easily. And these diagrams are present in every textbook, just in some way or the other, but the basic concept is same. So see, what happens? This NADH needs to be utilized inside the mitochondria. Okay. So what happens? NADH is picked up by dihydroxyacetone phosphate, which is again produced from glycolysis. Okay, it's the glycolysis that is giving rise to NADH plus H plus, and glycolysis also gives rise to dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Now this picks up NADH, converts it to NAD and itself becomes glycerol phosphate. Now we need to somehow utilize this glycerol phosphate, or we need to utilize this NADH that is present in the glycerol phosphate to produce ATP. So how does it happen? This glycerol phosphate from cytosol is transported into the mitochondria. Okay. Now mind it, this conversion from dihydroxyacetone phosphate to glycerol phosphate is done by glycerol phosphate dehydrogenase. Glycerol phosphate dehydrogenase. There are two isomers. One is a cytosolic isomer and another is the mitochondrial isomer. In both these shuttles, there are same enzymes that exist inside cytosol and inside mitochondria. So what happens? Now this mitochondrial glycerol phosphate dehydrogenase, it again converts glycerol phosphate to dihydroxyacetone phosphate. But in this case, it does not give back the NADH, it gives FADH2. This reaction, this mitochondrial glycerol phosphate dehydrogenase utilizes FAD and gives rise to FADH2. Now you all know that FADH2 can enter into the electron transport chain via complex 2 and it will lead to production of 2 ATP. Alright, so remember this NADH, when shunted through the glycerol phosphate shuttle, it forms 2 ATP because ATP, I mean FADH2, when enters the electron transport chain, it will produce 1 ATP at complex 3 and 1 ATP at complex 4. Now this dihydroxyacetone phosphate is freely permeable and it will again go back to the cytosol where this cycle is completed. Okay, remember the recycled dihydroxyacetone phosphate is the main source of DHAP and glycolysis is the minor source. So see, glycolysis is given in a dotted line just to make you understand the source. I mentioned glycolysis, but this is actually the recycled dihydroxyacetone phosphate which has just come out of the mitochondria. Clear? So remember, if glycerol phosphate shuttle is used, we get 2 ATP from one molecule of NADH plus H plus because it is done via FADH2. Now let us look into the mallet shuttle. In mallet shuttle, what happens? NADH is again converted to NAD plus. Why? Oxaloacetate picks up, oxaloacetate utilizes NADH plus H plus and gets converted to malate. This is done by the enzyme malate dehydrogenase. It is a reversible enzyme. Malate dehydrogenase. This is present in cytosol. Of course, this is the outer side is the cytosolic side and this is the mitochondrial side. So what happens? This malate is freely permeable. Malate goes in, then the reverse reaction happens. So cytosolic malate dehydrogenase actually utilizes NADH, and mitochondrial malate dehydrogenase, this reaction is again catalyzed by malate dehydrogenase. This utilizes NAD plus and leads to production of NADH, and this NADH can enter the complex 1 of ETC and lead to production of 3 ATP. But this is not over yet. In glycerophosphate shuttle it was easy. The DHAP which was generated was being shunted back just after a single. So this is a monoenzymatic reaction, glycerophosphate shuttle. So it is a bit easy to remember. But in case of malate shuttle, there is another reaction. So we are not done yet. So what happens? Oxaloacetate is converted to aspartate. What is this reaction? This is nothing but transamination reaction. But we know in transamination reaction we need 2 amino acid and 2 keto acid. Okay. So glutamate along with that gets converted to alpha ketoglutarate. Okay. Now both malate and alpha ketoglutarate as well as aspartate and glutamate, these are all freely permeable. They can go in and out of mitochondrial membrane as and when they want. So this alpha ketoglutarate, which is now generated over here, okay, it now goes back and it is again converted to oxaloacetate via a transaminase. So the enzyme over here is aspartate transaminase or aspartate aminotransferase, or nothing but AST, or you also know it as serum glutamate oxaloacetate transaminase, so SGOT. Where this enzyme is present in SGOT? In liver, okay, in heart. So this SGOT, so as you have seen in previous slides, that malate shuttle is present in liver, kidney and preferably all other sites. So this is the complete reaction of malate shuttle. Remember, in case of malate shuttle we have a transamination and the products of transamination are also reused, because glutamate can freely go into the mitochondria and it will get transaminated and it will get converted to aspartate. Aspartate can again come into the cytosol and the reaction, the chain is completed. But the point here to remember is NADH gets absorbed and it gets generated back as NADH and it can go into the ETC forming 3 ATP. But it was different in glycerophosphate shuttle. So each of these shuttle may be used, may come as a short note, may come as a short question, may be asked in Viva, or even it may come as a difference. Okay, what are the differences between malate and aspartate shuttle? So we are almost done. This slide, actually speaking, this slide is not needed. Still, why I have included? Because of MCQs. It came in PGI a few years back. The question was, which of these is not a mitochondrial inner membrane transporter? Okay, or which of these compounds cannot be transported through mitochondrial inner membrane? A question also came, match the following transporter with the carriers. So if you choose to remember, fine. If you want to forget, fine. But just see over here. So what are the compounds that can go via the mitochondrial membrane in form of what? So ADP, phosphate, malate, pyruvate, these all can actually undergoes through and through passage with the help of these carriers. So ATP, ADP translocase, I already told you this is inhibited by atractyloside and bond-gregate. Phosphate and malate gets shunted by dicarboxylate carrier. citrate gets converted or transported by tricarboxylate carrier, pyruvate has its own carrier, and phosphate has its own carrier. Okay. Why? Because you see, the mitochondrial inner membrane is selectively permeable. It only allows passage of these compounds, nothing more, nothing less. Okay, so biologically important for you, anything other than these compound, if comes as an option, you need to simply cross that out, or you need to mark that if it's a all except type of question. So lastly, we come to the clinical aspect, that's the disease. Okay, why we are studying this chapter, what's the use in reading all of these? Okay, the use will be told very well to you in pediatrics when you will become a final year student, because these mitochondrial familial disorder, they actually affects the infant, because they are so deadly that once they are disease of childhood, the child will not survive into adulthood if these are they get affected. Okay, so a condition known as fatal infantile mitochondrial myopathy and renal dysfunction. Okay, this due to most oxidoreductase of the respiratory chain are diminished. The function of all oxidoreductase enzyme are deficient, and as the name suggests, it is fatal. Okay, the fetus dies in utero. So these are all genetic diagnosis. We need to diagnose these via genetic screening, and most of them via postmortem or postnatal diagnosis of the dead fetus. Next, this is very common, MELAS. Okay, this is a triad of mitochondrial encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke. Okay, this is an inherited disorder. Here in MELAS, the fetus won't die inside uterus, it will survive. However, this is due to problem in mitochondrial DNA, so it is inherited disorder. Okay, main problem is again reduction of function of the oxidoreductase enzyme. So mind it, oxidoreductase enzyme are very important. Over here, the oxidoreductase enzyme of complex 1, that is NADH coenzyme Q oxidoreductase, and cytochrome oxidase, or complex 4, they are deficient. So these are called by mutation in mitochondrial DNA. Okay, and these have also been implicated in production of diseases like Alzheimer's as well as diabetes mellitus. Okay, diabetes is a very strange and ever ongoing disease where new researchers are producing new data every day. But for you guys, just know that this is you can pass if you know MELAS. Okay, MELAS. What are the components of MELAS? What enzyme is deficient, and it's a defect of mitochondrial DNA, and it's a mitochondrial disease. Okay, and apart from them, as you saw, many antibiotics, drugs, and poison act by inhibiting the oxidative phosphorylation. So these are the clinical aspects. So to summarize, okay, so now let us summarize what all we studied in these 4 classes, 4 lessons. Okay, and what you should remember. Of course, you should remember everything, every point that I told you that comes as a long question short note. But to summarize, see, virtually all energy released from oxidation of carbohydrate, fat, and protein, okay, are made available into the mitochondria for reduction, okay, as reducing equivalent, either as proton, as hydride ion, or as electron. Okay, so these are funneled through the electron transport chain via a redox gradient of carriers, where they finally donate their electron to oxygen to form water, right? Now these redox carriers are grouped to 4 chains, okay, 4 complexes in the inner mitochondrial membrane, and out of them 3 are able to produce energy with the redox gradient. Complex 2 cannot produce, as it does not have the ample amount of redox potential to generate full ATP, that is 7.3 kilocalorie, does not have. I told you in previous classes, and these energy produced in the gradient will be used to form proton pump, proton gradient, and that proton gradient allows the proton passes through the proton pump, and that proton is pumped from the the intermembrane space to the inner mitochondrial membrane via the ATP synthase, and when these protons are pumped, that ATP synthase acts as a rotary motor, and the potential energy of the proton is used in the proton motive force is used to synthesize ADP, to unite ADP and PI to form ATP. In this way, the oxidation and phosphorylation are coupled and they meet the energy needs of the cell. Okay, so we are done here. If you are a student of MJ Medical College and you are watching this video, so soon an assignment will follow, and after they're done, after we get the result, I'll add the link of that assignment for other students in this video so that you can also give it a try. But remember, revise all the chapters. This is very important, very conceptual chapter, because it comes as a long question, short note, viva and whatnot. So feel free to get back to me in the comment section with any problems and queries that you are having in this chapter or any other chapter, and I will see you in the next one. Till then, bye and take care.